Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you and to share with you a spiritual practice that has been helpful to me during this time of COVID-19 and sheltering in place. I'm Debra Weir, and I'm the Associate Director for Spirituality in the Center for Lifelong Learning. This morning, the practice that I'd like to share with you is called centering prayer. It is a practice that I have engaged in over a number of years, but it's become especially helpful to me in this very interesting and unusual time. Because what I've noticed as we have been quite isolated these last several months is that my inner dynamics have shifted quite a lot. So those inner voices that I can usually walk away from in an office setting or another kind of setting, the ones that are loud and distracting and obnoxious, I can't quite get away from them in the same way that I can in other settings. I've also noticed that sometimes my feelings are aroused quite strongly, and it's easy to be pulled into a narrative story about some of those feelings. And that too is not very helpful. And so I've returned in this season, especially to the practice of centering prayer, because centering prayer has a couple of different dimensions. One of them is the intention to simply rest in God, to know that I can come to a practice of prayer and simply be with God and rest in God's love for me is particularly helpful when things aren't quite the same as they used to be. The other dimension of this prayer is that it is practice. It's a practice. It's never perfected. It's a practice of letting go. In the prayer itself, we enter into a time of silence. Typically, it's recommended 20 minutes, but even 5 or 10 minutes can assist me in getting out of my thoughts and back to a more centered place. So in the prayer, when our minds become active, which they will, in silence, we notice our thoughts, we notice the things that might distract us, and we simply let them go, as if they were floating by like a stream of consciousness. We see them and we let them go. And then another arises and we see it and we let it go. Usually what happens somewhere along the way is that we discover that we have jumped on one of those thought trains and we have expanded the idea, we have told the story in a new way, we have been distracted from our mission of resting in God. And that's normal, we don't beat ourselves up. We come back to our prayer word, which is usually a reminder of who God is and what God represents to us. Sometimes a word like love or peace or joy, something that draws us near to the heart of God can help us. So I'd invite you in this moment to consider a prayer word that might be yours for today. And then in just a minute, we will practice this prayer. Remember your word so you can come back to it, perhaps as a breath, perhaps as a repeating it to recenter yourself. In a few minutes, we will start. I have a chime. And I'll ring that, I'll let that play for a second to help us draw us into the prayer of silence for about 5 minutes. And then at the end of the 5 minutes, I will chime it again. So the second level, now that you have your word, I invite you to prepare your body by getting comfortable. And that might be sitting in a chair where you can sit up tall with your feet flat on the ground. It might be that you prefer the floor. You might want to sit on the floor, or you might even want to lie down. I know some people who prefer that position for this kind of prayer. So find a place to be comfortable in your space, and I will get us started in just a minute. Thank you for joining me today.